I want to talk about. Because this is a horror movie, we're going to have a few content warnings on this video. This movie is about violence against children. We will be briefly talking about domestic violence and child abuse. There's also a very brief mention of suicide. This video will also contain spoilers for The Black Phone, the movie, and also the short story, and will also contain very brief spoilers for the movie Signs. If you don't want to do any of this content, now would be the time to click away. Did I know anything about this before I saw one TikTok video on it? No. I've never heard of this short story before, I've never heard of this movie before, but I did see a TikTok video of somebody doing a review of it. I normally don't like horror. Gore is a little bit too much for me. I think many rated R movies they're just too much. Horror for me is a general no-go. I'm not saying I would never watch a horror movie, I never do watch horror movies. What I am saying is that things like gore, SA, jump scares, extreme violence, they're just not really my cup of tea. In my opinion, a big thing about the horror genre in general is seeing how much you can do. What's the most extreme thing you can do? So that's one of the biggest reasons I avoid horror. The thing is, I really love compelling stories, and horror usually has some of the most compelling stories. Horror is an excellent way to insert symbolism into a movie or a story or a video game even sometimes. If the story is good, to me, it does not matter what the format is. I will seek it out. There's nothing I like better than a good story. And in my opinion, this movie should not have been marketed as a horror. It should have simply been marketed as a thriller. So one of the biggest reasons I was nervous to see this movie, even though it did sound like a good story, is because it was classified as a horror instead of as simply a thriller. A horror movie, apparently, can just be anything that is meant to elicit fear in you, because honestly, if you ask my opinion, I would not count this as a horror movie. I would have simply classified it as a thriller, a psychological thriller. Again, that's my opinion though. I think technically, with the technical definition of what a horror movie is, this movie did have the intention to be scary. Not in like an extremely gross out kind of way, not in a slasher kind of way, and honestly not in a jump scare kind of way. There weren't that many jump scares. So by the technical definition, yes, it would be a horror. However, if you go into it expecting like your normal kind of slasher film, you're not gonna enjoy this. But if you're like me and that's really not your style and you don't like that kind of thing, you might really enjoy this. I think this is a very smart movie, and that's what I like about it. I think there are obviously some parts that are a little bit too long and weren't necessary, but I think there are more parts that could have been expanded on. So this movie actually originates as a short story. It was originally a short story, a 10-page short story written by Stephen King's son. I normally stay away from most Stephen King stuff because, like I said earlier, it's that kind of horror that I'm not really a fan of. But when I heard that the main character mostly used, wit and intelligence and cleverness to get out of the situation he's in, how it makes a good use of space and a great use of foreshadowing, I decided maybe I would be able to do this one. This movie's called The Black Phone. So the biggest part of our story is going to, of course, be the phone. Our main character, Finney Blake, is kidnapped by a serial killer who kidnaps and kills children from all around the area of his small town. He's put in a soundproof little room with hardly anything in it. There's a bed, a toilet, some rolled up carpets, and of course our black phone. While Finney Blake is trying to escape, the phone mysteriously starts ringing even though it's not plugged into anything. And when he answers this phone, he gets calls from the children his kidnappers killed before him. The boys that have been in this situation before him use their knowledge that they have gained to help Finney escape. Finney does end up finally escaping and actually killing the grabber, the man who kidnapped him in the first place, with help from the ghosts. One of my favorite parts about this story, however, is that the information that the ghosts give him are not a direct help to help him escape. Anytime he gets help from one of the spirits, you get all excited because you feel like he's about to escape. The answer has been handed to him. There's literally no way he could fuck it up. We have a ghost showing him exactly where he could find a cable to crawl out the window from. So it's a very exciting moment. We're like, yes, we're gonna see Finney escape, using his own wit and also hints from the ghosts. And then when it doesn't end up working, you get just as disappointed as Finney does in the moment. I think the emotional roller coaster of feeling like super excited when you get a clue as to how to escape, followed by such disappointment and fear when it doesn't end up working, is an amazing thing that the movie does really well. It really does feel like we're going along in this experience with him. When it doesn't work, we're just as disappointed as Finney is. The moment where he almost escapes, he makes it so close, he gets outside and then gets recaptured, and he looks at the phone when it starts ringing and tells it to fuck off because he's pissed, because he got captured again. The hint didn't help. As an audience member, you can feel that. I think this movie is very clever. I think the protagonist is really well done. Part of what really helped sell the emotion was that they actually used child actors. Finney is supposed to be 13 and he looks 13. Some of their lines might sound kind of weird and kind of stilted. Specifically, I think some of the lines that Robin had come off slightly weird. If you have a movie that's supposed to be about teenagers and they use grown-ups, the acting might be more on point because they're adults, but that emotion just isn't really there, I think. I think the children in this movie are particularly good actors. I just think sometimes the writing did them a little bit dirty, and it's hard to act. Acting is hard. I find it particularly interesting the way Robin pronounced Nam. He said Nam, even though it's Vietnam. So I thought that was a pretty interesting take. This story ends with Finney using all the information that ghosts have given him combined instead of individually to help him escape. Every piece of information that a ghost has given him before helps in his final daring escape to leave. This is also a great example of how smart Finney is. Using information that doesn't really seem relevant in order to conduct a way for him to escape. Allow me to go off on a small tangent about the movie Signs to explain something I really liked about this movie. In Signs, the movie begins with the pastor's wife, the mother, dying, and she says a bunch of gobbledygook that really doesn't make any sense until the end of the movie. She says something about the kid with the baseball bat, says they'll let the girl leave water laying around, and then at the very end of the movie, the pastor remembers what the wife said, and that's how they end up killing the aliens, right? Honestly, I think that was so badly done. It felt very shoehorned in, it felt very fake and false, and I did not like that part of Signs. And everyone I've talked to about Signs straight up doesn't remember that part because it doesn't fucking make sense. So that in Signs, how badly that was done, I think was so well done in this movie. In her first phone call, Billy tells Finney that as a ghost you start to forget things like your name, about how long they were trapped in there. One of the kids forgets the combination to the lock, but knows that they wrote it on the wall. So as a ghost, you start to forget things. And so when their phone calls don't really make a lot of sense, or they say things that seem out of place, it's really easy to chalk it up to that. Or it's really easy for Finney to interpret it the wrong way. And I think at the very end of the movie, where Finney puts together all the pieces and uses all the hints that he got from the ghosts to properly build his trap for the grabber, I think is what Signs was going for, but what this movie actually did well. Finney was actually just putting together the puzzle at the end to help him finally escape. I like the fact that the police in this movie took the sister seriously. Normally whenever you have a supernatural element in a movie, cops tend to talk down to and demean, not really listen to children. It's an overused trope at this point, and it's usually a waste of time trying to get cops on your side and they don't believe you. But in this movie, right off the bat, they believe that the sister has visions. I like that they used the cops in order to meet an end instead of just being a nuisance. They believed the sister immediately, and that helped them find where the children were buried. Something else I really loved is the voice effects that they did for the kids on the phone. The ghost children sound like they're on the phone, even though we have the visuals of them walking around. I think it's a very neat and interesting thing to do, really fun, because I've seen a lot of movies where it starts out where it sounds like you're on the phone, but as we get a visual image, they make it sound normal, just a person talking, and I like that they kept it sounding like these kids were on the phone the whole time. I loved having the visual of the ghost children there even when Finney couldn't see them. I love the fact that the phone calls from the dead children don't really make sense at first. I like that the phone calls are vague. I like that they have the secret messages hidden in them that don't make sense until the very end of the movie. I like that Finney has to use his wit to interpret them correctly in order to help him escape, and understanding that doing each thing individually is not actually going to help him leave. I liked that he killed the grabber in the end. I think that was a very strong finish. I think a lot of movies shy away from having their protagonists do anything terribly violent. You have a lot of heroes that are like, no, I can't kill anybody. I love the use of the phone as the final weapon. And even though some people might think it's cheesy,
or that it was kind of silly, but I actually really loved at the very end where he put the phone up to the grabber's ear and he said, "It's for you," and then all of the dead children come back to say their final, fuck yous. I really liked that. Is it a little cheesy? Maybe, but I still liked it. Something else I liked about this movie is there is no SA at all. Horror movies especially tend to just throw SA in there as a joke or as like a plot point, and it's pretty terrible. I hate it so much. Again, horror has a thing of like seeing how much they can put in a movie, and they think that nothing's off the table. So something I really appreciated about this movie is it was rated R, but they didn't feel like they had to go so extreme with it. On the opposite hand, something I didn't like is child abuse. Why was there child abuse in this movie? I really don't think it was necessary. I really, really hated how they tried to make the father redeemable at the end. Absolutely not. Like, I'm sorry your wife died, but that is not an excuse to beat your children. Also, they use the F slur, like within the first 30 minutes of the movie. No need for that. I understand Finney was getting bullied. Pick something else. Pick him being bullied for being a nerd. I don't understand the need for a lot of directors to be like, well, it was the 80s and it was more acceptable back then, therefore we will put it in our movie. I don't see the need for it. Just don't do it. I don't understand. I don't see the point. Finney can be bullied without being called a homophobic slur. Something else I didn't like. I really enjoyed Robin and Finney's friendship. I wish they'd expanded more on it. They have such a brief conversation in the bathroom. It's literally Finney thanking him for getting the bullies off his back, and then Robin asking him for help on his homework. And that's it. That was supposed to establish that they were really, really good friends. I don't know, it just wasn't strong enough for me. There are so many people that are like, well, why can't we have a movie about strong male friendship? I feel like this would have been a really good way to do it. Have Finney and Robin shown to be like really, really good friends. And then the loss of Robin feels so much more impactful because we know how much of a friend he is. Because honestly, at the point in the movie where Robin gets killed, for me, it just felt like Finney had lost his protection from bullies, not that he had lost like his best friend. So at the end of the movie, when Robin is helping Finn learn how to fight and stand up for himself, it would have been that much more impactful. Don't get me wrong, that's still a great scene. I still really love that scene and it still had a lot of emotion behind it. But I feel like if they had been established as such great friends at the beginning of the movie, instead of just saying it while they're on the phone, I feel like that would have been so much better. Another thing I didn't like, that I feel like most people will disagree with me on, I did not need the romance aspect between Finney and his crush. I honestly do not care. This movie could have instead expanded on Robin and Finney's friendship instead of Finney having a random crush on some girl in school. It doesn't matter. This girl did nothing for the plot. She was just there. I don't think she even gets named. It would be different if this was Finney's girlfriend and they already had an emotional connection so that when Finney goes missing, it like really impacts her. There's not even a suggestion that they've talked before until like the day Finney gets kidnapped. How well could she actually know him, you know? I think if they had skipped over that whole romance subplot and just focused on Robin and Finney's friendship, that would have made a bigger difference emotionally in the story. Something else I didn't like, and it's like super nitpicky, but I really wish they had done a better of introducing us to the fact that Finney is a smart person. He's very clever. I think they tried to do this with the scene with Robin in the bathroom, where they're talking about him helping with his math homework. They always try and make it seem like anybody who can do math is like super smart. I can do math really fast and I'm an idiot. I feel like they should have done something else to show us that Finney was very, very smart and very resourceful. I feel like if he had used resources and cunning to get away from his bullies, that would have been a better example of how smart he is. Just stating that he's good at math just didn't do it for me. Again, that's super nitpicky because later on in the movie, I think we do get good examples of how smart he is. I just get annoyed when the only way they feel like showing smart characters is math. And again, it just made it feel like he was a tutor for Robin, not like they were friends. It would have been so much better if he had done something like ingenuitous and creative to try and get away from the bullies, and it didn't quite work, but you can tell like how smart he is, and that Robin still had to come in and help him a little bit. Something else I wish they had changed. In the movie, the little sister's like obsessed with Jesus, and I'm sick of Jesus in movies, first of all. The little sister keeps trying to talk and pray to Jesus as a way to try and like help these dreams come to her so that she can help find Finney. In the short story, she's obsessed with the occult and has tarot cards. Why not do that? I think this story would have been way cooler if she was obsessed with the occult and was trying to use tarot cards or dream interpretation that way. Pulling religion into it is always going to cheapen your story for me, unless you're making a commentary on religion, which this story is not. Changing tarot cards and occult stuff to Jesus, why would you do that? She has psychic powers. That's literally occult shit. In the short story, it's hinted that the siblings can hear each other's thoughts and have visions of each other. That sounds pretty occultish to me. Why not use that? Anyways, tarot cards trump Jesus any day, and that would have made the movie so much cooler. Also, if you had to have that child abuse in there, because for some reason directors love that shit, having a child who likes the occult in a Christian household is, that happens a lot. So it would give the dad another excuse to be a dickhead. I think the suicide of the mother was pointless. It was not needed. It only served as a purpose to try and redeem the dad, which I've already said I hate that. I hate that they did that. There was no reason to have the dad beat his children and then try to make us feel sorry for him because his wife committed suicide because of shit he was doing. By the way, that was also his fault. In the short story, there is brief mention of their parents fighting, and it mentions that a vase was either knocked over or thrown. So there is a hint at domestic violence, or at least an allusion to the possibility of there being domestic violence. However, his parents are still together. His mom is not dead in the book, and actually when he's discovered, the first thing he does is ask for his mom. Most of the lines from The Grabber are lifted straight out of the short story, which I really enjoy, staying very true to the narrative. Something I really didn't like about the short story is it's just fat phobia. The Grabber is described as the fat man more times than by his actual name, even though he actually is named in the short story and he's not named in the movie. Finney knows his name right off the bat in this short story. The short story doesn't include anything except for Finney being trapped. It starts with Finney getting kidnapped and ends with him killing the Grabber. So everything that happens outside of that room is only in the movie. So when we start off the short story, Finney already knows the Grabber's name. Albert is the name of the Grabber, and it was unclear to me whether Finney, knew Albert, he was a neighbor that Finney knew really well, or just knew Albert's name from being around, because, Albert introduces himself as a part-time clown, which Finney did not know. Something that's very confusing to me is the way time passes in both the movie and the short story. The short story is a little bit more clear, because when it cycles through day and night, it'll tell you. Finney was asleep until the sun came up, so I'm pretty sure it's 3 days in the short story that Finney is in the underground bunker. In the movie, it's way more confusing. I'm not sure, how long the Grabber had been, murdering and kidnapping kids. I don't know how long it is between kids. I don't know how long these kids are normally in the basement. In the short story, the timeline of the Grabber kidnapping kids is pretty clear. It tells you when the first kid was kidnapped 2 years ago. And then it tells you 2 months after that, 2 months after that, then the break, then 2 months after that. There's a very clear passage of time. It's just confusing when Billy's in the bunker, how much time is passing. In the movie, it's just straight up confusing. I don't know when things are happening. I don't know how long Finney was in the basement. I don't know how long any of the kids were in the basement. It's really just unclear about what's going on. All we know is that Robin was kidnapped on a Friday, and also Finney was kidnapped on a Friday, and we only know this because the little sister tells us. We don't know how many weeks apart that was. And again, when the sister is searching for Finney and trying to force herself to have these dreams, when the police are at the assembly, it's very unclear how long Finney has been gone for that point. Finney has enough time to dig almost a 4-foot hole in the ground. So I'm just a little bit confused on exactly how much time is supposed to have been passing. He only got fed twice. In the short story, Finney only gets a call from Billy because that's the only one he knew. And in the story, Billy just kind of gives him, all the clues he needs to put it together. Billy in the story mentions that none of the others survived that long because the Grabber simply killed them before they could recover. I'm glad they switched it for the movie, turning it into the Grabbers kind of playing a game with the kids, and the reason he hasn't killed Finney yet is because he simply hasn't been playing the game. I feel like that makes a little bit more sense as to why Finney is lasting longer than the other kids. I also like that so many more children were added to the phone calls. I think it's so interesting hearing about how the other kids did their best to escape. I think it's so interesting how each phone call leaves a little bit of a breadcrumb for him to eventually put together at the end. I think the ending scene in the movie is way more dramatic than the short story. In the short story, he just kind of walks up to Albert and like hits him in the face with the phone over and over again. In the movie, where it's like so planned out and he basically sets up a trap, I think that's so much better. I think it's so much more of an emotional payoff to like how long we've been in this with Finney and watching him try so hard to get out and then piecing it all together at the end. I will say, in both the short story and the movie, I'm disappointed with the ending. And by being disappointed with the ending, I don't mean I'm disappointed with how Finney kills the grabber or that he kills the grabber. I love that. I think that's great. I enjoyed it in the movie a little bit more. It's just a little bit more dramatic. I don't like that the short story just ends immediately after that. In the short story, it literally ends with Finney holding the phone up to the grabber's ear and says, "It's for you," and then it stops. We don't even get to hear what the grabber hears on the phone, which I really like that part of the movie. And I don't like how the movie ends, because Finney goes back to school and flirts with the girl. That's how it ends. We had such a big emotional payoff, and you're gonna end it with a little bit of flirting? That's a bad ending. I feel like the movie should have stopped with him and his sister in the ambulance. I feel like the scene with Finney in the school at the end was unnecessary and boring and kind of almost ruined the emotional payoff at the end. It felt very cheesy. I didn't need to see how the boys reacted to him coming back. Who cares? He just survived death. Bullies are the least of his worries. I like the movie ending better than the short story, simply because we get more details. Again, I just really don't like the whole crush subplot. It was unnecessary. The short story also had me looking up what happens when you spray somebody in the face with wasp spray. Because that's how the grabber kidnaps Finney in the book. It's specifically mentioned as wasp spray. And I'm like, I feel like that's poisonous. So all in all, I know I've been talking a lot about things I didn't like about this movie, but I'm nitpicking it so heavily because I liked it so much. It reminds me of Pan's Labyrinth, where like I love that movie so much, but if there were a few tweaks to it, I think it would be perfect. This movie is really, really good. I really, really like it. I didn't even think I would like it that much. I was really nervous to see it. I highly suggest everyone go watch it. Obviously, there are certain things I didn't like about the movie. It's not a perfect movie. But I will say, as of right now, it's definitely like in my top 5, which is weird because like my top 3 are horror movies, and I don't like horror. Like I said earlier, horror is one of the best ways to tell a good story. Don't go into it expecting a slasher film or like a stereotypical horror film. It's definitely more of a thriller, and you will get super anxious, at least I did. I will also say, if you do not like gore, this movie has a very, very limited amount of gore. There's hardly any. If you do not like jump scares, this movie has hardly any. There are a few, but they're pretty rare. The short story had a little bit too many details that didn't fucking matter. The movie also had some details that just didn't fucking matter. I still like them both. I still think they were really good. I just think the movie could have been tightened up in some areas. It's an hour and 42 minutes, so it's already like a pretty short movie, especially in the era of 3-hour movies nowadays. And I feel like they could have made better use of this time. I feel like if they cut out the last scene entirely and just ended with them in the ambulance, if they cut out the part with the crush at school and instead replaced it with parts where you could see his friendship with Robin and see how close they were, I think it was very well established how close he and his sister were. And I feel like if they had done a similar thing with him and Robin, that would have made more of an emotional impact. I feel like they should have just gotten rid of the domestic violence in general. That was not necessary. Overall, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. No movie is perfect, and everyone's going to disagree on what a movie needed to do, or should have done, or shouldn't have done, or what was good in a movie. These are just my opinions, and while I really enjoyed the movie, I think it could have been changed a little bit. I'm glad I forced myself to go see it, even though I didn't want to. And this is a movie I will definitely be rewatching. I will not be rereading the short story, because it was actually kind of a letdown after watching the movie. But I just wanted to thank you all for watching, and I hope you also enjoyed this movie.